Is there a feedback that it started? I'm not sure. I guess I need to check. Start recording. Recording started. Let people in the meeting know that you're being recorded. Okay, so everyone knows that we are now recording, hopefully. So yeah, let's go. Are there anything else we should clarify apart the timings and things like that? Hopefully everyone is available for tomorrow. If you know that you won't be making the meeting that I'm going to schedule also later the week, let me know. I'll probably schedule another meeting later today for the next day. Depending on the workload I have and how prepared I am, it might be on Wednesday or Thursday. I will have to see a bit. Anyway, I'm sharing. Let me start WebStorm. Everyone should now have access and have installed WebStorm. You can do it immediately and run it using a 14-day demonstration license. And of course, I have confirmation from CGB that everyone in the team will be receiving licenses from Arcadia for their own use. So please let me know if you are technically unavailable to install or make use of WebStorm, because my assumption is that going forward, everyone in the team will have access to WebStorm. Now I will take you through how you can start using WebStorm. So when you open it, you can open a folder directly as the root of your solution or project. So in this case, you will see that on my Git, this is my Git root for the main branch, a develop branch now. I created a subfolder called the wiki, and then under there you will find a folder called seminar. So if I just open this in WebStorm, you will see the same as I do now. And under here you will have the overview of the different seminars that I'm going to hold. I also invited Olga to have a seminar on date and time zone problem. Would you be able to present that later this week, Olga?
Yes, I hope so.
Maybe you can take the slot on Wednesday then? Would that be okay for you?
I'm not sure, because I need to finalize these bugs and then finalize my presentation. So I will inform you when it will be ready.
Okay, we'll return to that tomorrow then. Okay. So just to break it up then, I will be focusing on the syntax rules and also some advanced capabilities in this text editor that we have available in WebStorm. Tomorrow I will be spending more of an extended session on clean code principles. Then on Wednesday or Thursday, I will introduce the concept of data models to be used on the UI components. I will briefly mention state and services. Well, this is a very short topic about unique identifiers. It'll probably be only 15, but it was worth, I think, to have it as a separate topic, because it's a general nature, but at the same time it's very important for subsequent meetings or parts. So once we agreed on what is a unique identifier, we will talk about data models for data tables, and then also data models for fields. Also, we want to go to unit testing, both in C# and Angular. We will discuss briefly the need and use case for performance tests. Now, these are more like advanced topics in that they will be quite specific for how I think about things and how I manage to solve things. Everything up here, I think, is something everyone could be familiar with, but these things will be very specific for Adrega. and then the general framework that I put in place. But we'll get around to that eventually. Let me open today's session. By the way, you will see that on top here there's a file name. I'm using the MD extension. It stands for Markdown, and there is a web page called Markdown Guide. I do encourage you to look at this because Markdown is getting more and more traction. Actually, if you haven't seen it or maybe paid too much attention to it, all of the main repositories on GitHub, they have like a lower section down here. Usually it's a readme.md. So this is the first exposure I had for this very easy to understand textual formatting. So it's much easier to understand than HTML and other comparable languages. So I do encourage you to get familiar with the Markdown and how it can be used. So I'm going to use this extensively in my seminar. And you can already see here some nice capabilities that it has. In fact, I find that WebStorm makes an excellent editor for Markdown. So if you open a document in this editing environment, you have different view modes, and it's easy to edit. Anyway, topic was Adrega syntax guide, and I've seen during the years people applying their own coding syntax, and until now we haven't actually paid too much attention on it. But I think now that we're actually establishing a framework from scratch, which is the TypeScript Angular one, it's a good time to reflect on how we are creating code and what quality, but also how it looks. And I think if everyone could get behind in making use of the same casing, the same use of white space, then eventually the coding will become much easier to read. So if you have a consistent look of the code, it's much better to understand. You can really understand the intent of the code more than looking at and see what strange characters are there on your screen. Anyway, I try to summarize the main case types that we are currently using in our code. Pascal case, it has a capital P and a capital C. There's no space between the words. Camel case, it's a lowercase first character and still capitalization on word boundaries. Snake case, we will see somewhere. Separation is with underscore. Kebab case, the separation is with the minus symbol. This is the variant of the snake case. I haven't mentioned this in a table below, but for C#, traditionally we would have that applied for constant values in the code. But I don't want to enforce that as a convention. I think we don't need a convention for constant values. I don't think we have too many of them, so feel free to use a convention on that. Anyway, this is a convention I would like to see everyone follow. In C#, it's very simple. Folder names, file names, class names, class members, all are Pascal case. Whereas the only exception would be camel case for variables. Moving over to the TypeScript world, it's a bit more complicated because there's some previous conventions in place, which I think we should follow. So there are some code generators that we could use, and you often would see folder names and file names with the kebab case. And we want to use the Pascal case for classes, interfaces, and enumerables. But I think you would see that it's already a standard in TypeScript to use camel case for class members and methods. And luckily, at least I would say, we have a common understanding of what the variable is in both environments. SQL, I think maybe this would something I would like to get some input from you, Elena, what you are comfortable with. I know that initially everything was capitalized, but in the later years we've been using Pascal case for tables and table column values, and we've been using camel case for variables. So could you comment on that, Elena? Is it okay to use Pascal case for tables columns, or would you like to maintain the old style?
It seems now we have mix of different styles. Some tables has only uppercase, some mixed, some lowercase.
But if you could choose now, say that you're creating a new table tomorrow, which casing would you prefer to use on the table name itself?
I think the table name with uppercase and columns name first letter upper.
Pascal case.
Yes, maybe yes.
Okay, so the convention then would be to follow is that we can continue to make table names in Screaming Snake case, but column values should be in Pascal case. Is that a good summary?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, good. Hold on, everyone. I will update the notes here. Actually, let me do it immediately so we don't forget. So let me separate these two to have tables there and then columns down here. And then we'll have this maintained. Then we'll have, yeah. So basically, we will be using Pascal case. It might be the old one is Screaming Snake case for columns, but we will be converting to Pascal case when we create new elements. I think in SQL, I think it's a place where you don't want to make too much refactoring about changing file names or folder names or table names, because that will be quite difficult to check against the use case that we have in different areas. Some names will be used by store procedures functions, some are used in C#, and maybe in some cases it will be used TypeScript as well. So I think you should be very careful in renaming SQL elements. So just keep that in mind. But certainly when we create new SQL elements, we want to make use of the new functions. So I think that's sufficient for casing. As far as spacing, I think this is something that is kind of annoys me the most when I see badly spaced code. It's really hard to read, I think, in my mind, and I find myself immediately correcting it and saving a correction. It will be very good if everyone could adhere to some standard for this, because then obviously I don't have to revisit those changes and make just space changes necessarily. So a good convention is to use a minimum amount of space, but at the same time you want to add some space for separation of different elements. So this is my suggestion to follow. So I want to standardize in using spaces for indentation and not tab. Tab character is often converted to different spaces depending on your editing environment. Some editors might be using like 2 spaces for a tab or 4 spaces for a tab. So basically, if you use spaces instead of tabs, you will always be using the same indentation regardless of what editing surface you're using. So I would like to see a space after if, like as I'm doing now, that's a space. So I'd like to use a space before and after operators. So here there's also already a space between the parentheses and equal sign. In this case, I would also want to add a space after. In the case of parentheses and curly parentheses and brackets, I would recommend using a space before. I sometimes add also a space after, but I think that can be optional. I think the symbol itself is a good indicator to what it comes after, but at least have a space before would be good. As far as commas, I like to type like this. So you would see that I have a space after the comma, but not before. But before, I don't think it's needed, and it looks a bit strange in my mind. So hopefully everyone could adhere to this standard. As far as line breaks, I think, again, my focus is to have readable code. Code that is spread on too many lines is sometimes not readable. But if there's like a few characters on each line, then often you would have to scroll on several pages to see the entire content. Then I'm happy to have more like a concise or compact coding. But if you wanted to have a single line if case body, I mean, then the body should be very simple. If it contains more than one logic element, then often you want to add it to a body where you separate the body in the way you see it here. Now, there are different things in convention in C# and Angular. So in Angular, currently we are enforcing this standard because we're using TypeScript linter. And I don't want to mess too much with the lint set configuration. I don't feel confident in making too many changes because often they are breaking changes and we introduce a lot of new problems. So I think I'm happy to see this kind of syntax for line separation and use of line breaks. So hopefully everyone is keeping track of this so far.
Can I have a question? Yes. Before you?
Yes.
I'm not okay. I don't program very often, but you want us to use 4 spaces instead of using tab.
Yes.
I don't know but I thought that you could set up the tabs to be a specific amount of spaces, so it would always be identical. And also, if I want to outdent or indent a huge chunk of code, then it's easy to just, at least in Visual Studio, mark it and press tab, or mark it and press shift tab to outdent it again. If I use space, then I will just remove all the.
Oh, I think I understand the confusion in this. I also use tab character for indent, outdent, but I have configured, or I have double checked that the default configuration is such that the editor inserts spaces and not the tab character.
Okay. Then I'm good. Okay.
I think this is the common setting for most modern editors to use space instead of tab. But it might be that you're using a different editor that I'm currently using here, in which case you will double check that when you save your indentations, that these are actually made out of space characters and not tab characters.
Yeah, I can check that.
So now this is the more advanced part, and this is how we can apply some formatting to what I would call tabular data in the code. I will also show some examples and hopefully it will explain for you what I mean. I wouldn't actually suggest doing that manually. It's a very time-consuming task to properly indent a huge table of data. So I wouldn't actually say that that was a requirement. Instead, I do hope that you're able to use either Visual Studio or in TypeScript. Of course, you would be using WebStorm. So this plugin that I am linking here, you should be able to install immediately. But for C#, because I think still this tabular formatting is also applicable for C#. If you don't have the Radar development tool at hand, and I don't want to make it a requirement for now, but at least then you should make use of this extension I found available for Visual Studio. This is available for Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, but I just know that I have no personal experience with this extension, but it seems to contain much of the same functionality that I would demonstrate today using the WebStorm environment. So hopefully you can download and become familiar with these extensions, because they are very, very time-saving when working on formatting tabular data. Okay, so let's go into some live coding. I will open my solution. And one thing you might find strange, this is also an advanced setting in the WebStorm environment. If you go to settings, you will find under editor, general editor tabs. I have actually opted for removing tabs altogether, and that is very unconventional, I think. But I saw a recent video from JetBrains, developers of Radar and WebStorm, where the developer was introducing this new functionality of removing tabs, and he had a good explanation to why he thought that was a good idea. But basically, it means that you're less required to use the mouse. Instead, you're using the keyboard much more. So just note, I have made use of this setting for a few days, and I kind of like it. So yeah. Another thing, then if you search for shortcut, then it's very easy here to learn how to look for and search for keyboard shortcuts. I'm probably one of the guys who's using lots of shortcuts, but I do encourage you to think about starting to learn shortcuts, because it's a huge time save, actually. So working in a coding environment like this, which has such many advanced functions, these functions can be instantly triggered using different shortcuts. So I do encourage you to look this up. There's also a reference online to the standard shortcuts that WebStorm is supporting. So yeah. Last, I would say, pay attention to the background here. These are very, very important navigation assistance. So Control T, I often use to go to different files, classes, class members, functions. You have access to everything. You can go specifically to files like this. I also use extensively Control comma. This is actually a place of clicking on tabs on top. Often when coding, I would be like visiting 20 files, and there's not a room for 20 tabs. So I think that's mainly the main reason why I don't use tabs anymore. It's much easier to have a list of recently visited documents. Control F2, I don't use too much, to be honest. Anyway, I was a bit sidetracked again. Let's open this file using Control T now, and then entering the string. You can see that it's actually searching for the class and the file. Let's open the file. Let's navigate to the file in the solution. You can see here this is actually using the wrong convention. It's using snake case. So I want to rename this. Let's see, rename. Where are you? It's actually not seen here. There's a shortcut for it. Control R. So I pressed Control R and R again. Control R is for refactoring. I'm not sure why it's not popping up on the context menu. It was a bit strange. Anyway, one important thing about using WebStorm for renaming files and not doing it in the File Explorer, and which is you would maybe want to do that in File Explorer, but I wouldn't suggest doing that because in WebStorm you can actually have this set to search for references. So let me change the name as with the convention we are establishing. And if I do refactor now, it will actually search for the use of this file and make sure that these references are updated. So you can see here that this use case that I have here in this test file is now making use of the new file name. So that is quite important to understand. So let me just double check. There's no rename here. Oh, okay, it's under refactor, I guess. Rename, okay. So you need to go, I said it was a refactoring option, so you need to visit the refactoring option to do that. Okay, so next, that was a changing of the file name. Now this is a good example of, what is bit spacing. Control T, Control V, then open it. You will see here, it's already highlighting some problems. And I do encourage you to have keep an eye on the problems tab, and especially the current file. When you're doing coding, you want to make sure that you follow the conventions. And one of the things we talked about was use of space. And here you can see that the TypeScript linter has warned about this. What I can do, I can go to the top of the file, and then I can go to the next problem. This is a control sequence called keeping the Alt keyboard down and pressing the Alt keyboard down and then doing page down. That jumps immediately to the next problem in the file. And this you can see here now, if I press on Control Alt, it's not Control, but the Alt key, hold that down, then Enter. I get a context menu, which allows me to fix all easy to fix lint problems in the file. So I can do this, and voila. You can see that you now have proper spacing. And you can see that the problems are now less down here. There's also a few more that I usually try to do all of these suggestions because they're kind of a good convention. So I just continue pressing Alt and page down, and to get to the next problem area. So these problems here are often easily found and easily solved using the built-in resolver for you. Here, if I should do a code cleaning principle, I would also be removing these unused functions, but for now I will just leave them there. It's a bit outside of the scope today. But hopefully you understood that I can use automation to fix spacing. This will also fix the new line break cases. Now, this is going into the more advanced. I've spent already half an hour. Let me show you this example. So Control T, Control V. It immediately, you see, finds this property, this class. And this is where I wanted to showcase some table formatting. In this case, it's a long list of properties that is entered into this dictionary. And it's sometimes difficult to see everything when it's such a flat list. So I wanted to make it more like a spreadsheet. So I can do that by just highlighting. That's one thing I wanted to show you guys. So if I use Control W, it will be extending the selection. So I have my cursor placed on this property. If I press W once, Control W, twice, thrice, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times. You can now see that it's constantly selecting the broader and broader scope, and this is quite nice. So, but let me manually do this, and then I want to join these files, these lines. So, sorry, let me do this one more time. Control T, join. You can see that I don't need to know that join is Control Shift J. I can learn that later on. But I just search for join, and I can apply by clicking on the line now. Join lines. Now, of course, this is not very readable yet. So I want to do some advanced editing now. So what I want to do is to select everything. So everything is selected. And then I do find. And then on top here, I would do a search in selection. And then I want to search for a separator. So that would be curly braces, comma, space. And then I would want to search for all references, all occurrences. Now you can see, if I roll further to right, it's actually placing a cursor on all of these elements. Now, if I use my left arrow button, you will see that I can skip between different elements here. Now, I wanted to have a new line after the comma. Notice that the cursor is placed many places on the line. I just print enter, and then I have this compact view of the list. So this is already much more readable than it was before. I hope you agree. And just to repeat myself, what I did was to press on Control F to search, select all, and then I typed a character that I wanted to find, and then I had to select all occurrences. And you can see here, now it's actually highlighting all the spaces in this line. Okay. Now I wanted to further enhance the readability of this. So what I'm going to do now is to trigger the extension that I have installed for WebStorm. And it's an extension that allows me to align and sort lines by columns. If I select this, there's an option. I'll reset everything so it starts from scratch. So I want to separate out, you can see the samples down here. So I want to separate out using comma. And you can see it's immediately showing a preview of how that would look. And then I want to separate even further. So I want to do like this delimiter, like so. I could even go further and add semicolon. You can see now to the right, it's actually showing the row number, column numbers actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I want to sort this list alphabetically based on the first entry here. So in that case, it would be, or the second entry that would be. So number 2, you can see now activities is on top. If I press OK on this, you will see that I have some spacing issues. I fixed it. So now I need a command there. Now you can see the list is much more readable, I would say. Instead of having this long list of over several pages, it's much more compact. It's sorted alphabetically on the first term, and it's easy to read. And so I find myself using this column formatting option more and more, and hopefully you can also put it and make use of it. So the last topic I wanted to mention is code quality. Let me open this one. Control T, Control V, click. You will see, again, I wanted to highlight, now there's 47 issues here. And so what I usually do is to go to the top of the file and then press on Alt, page down, and it identify problems for me. If I keep the Alt key down and press on the Enter key, often you will find that there's a context menu you can use to actually fix the problem for you. So you don't actually need to do too much. You just go down and fix things this way. So that's kind of something you can use the editor for. So yeah, that's the today's topics. I already spent too much time on it, but hopefully you learned something new. It's really important now that you've heard stick to the conventions. I will be spending a few hours each week reviewing your code. So everything that you submit into develop and 5.4, I will review and of course give you some feedback if I find that there are some improvements to be done. As far as coding style is, that's this. Are there any comments or questions to what I've just gone through?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
Yes, I also think that this WebStorm refactor functionality is quite useful, and previously, as I remember, it was integrated to Visual Studio with this resharper tool. But currently, I found that I can't find it there. So is it so that during those 3 years that I was absent at the industry, they removed this functionality from resharper tool to WebStorm, or because it would be really nice to have it integrated to Visual Studio also. And I was surprised that when I didn't find it there.
I don't know, to be honest. I'm not using the ReSharper extension to Visual Studio. I know that it still exists and is being constantly updated. it seems strange to me that they have removed some functionality to it, but maybe they did that because they have created a competing product. You know, I'm a very I use Raider, which is another JetBrains IDE for C# coding, and if you can't do what I did here easily in Visual Studio, I will show you more. It's a good point for me maybe to use my time in code cleaning with the Raider tool, and you can see how I make use of Raider to clean C# code. The same can be applied to the TypeScript in WebStorm, but maybe you can. If you find that it would be convenient for you to have Raider, then I can ask CGB to provide you with a license. I think, to be honest,
because probably during these 3 years, maybe they split it up. This let's say ReSharper tool for separate tools. Maybe
yes.
I'm not sure, because what you've showed us today with this refactor, previously I used also this functionality. It's really useful, and I was surprised when I didn't find it.
But do you have installed ReSharper, right? But it's not part of this installation yet. Okay. It sounds
yes,
to me
and I
like
was thinking that this is maybe a configuration issue. So, but I will check.
Yeah, if you could do that, it'd be great. Because, as I said, I'm more than willing to encourage CGB to give you access to Raider, because it's just a great tool for me. So,
and maybe, do you know, previously it was possible to store, let's say, configuration file for this formatting rules. I'm not sure is it possible now, but if, for example, we could share some of this configuration setting for our conventions, it will be really great. Because previously you could configure your tool and your code will be formatted automatically, let's say.
Yes, so in TypeScript, it's already taken care of by the tslint config. In C#, I don't have a particular files that's set up with configuration for code editing. So I think it's basically picking up that automatically based on some settings. So, but there's another convention used by more and more editors. That is this edit config file, which kind of sets up a few standardized properties. I think Visual Studio is also respecting this file. But let's go into the details maybe after my session tomorrow. You can see how I make use of Raider tomorrow to clean code. That'll involve a lot of refactoring. And then maybe you have a chance to check before then if you have access to these tools. Let me show you how it looks in Raider. Let me open. Let me open something here. So say I wanted to make a change to the parameters. I can. It's Control R, by the way. Where I can right click and do refactor. You can see different refactoring options here in the local context. So this is a typical interface for refactoring in Raider, and I would think you would have similar context menus, right clicking and the refactoring option in Visual Studio. If not, then yeah, they're actually not part of Visual Studio anymore.
Yeah, because the interface looks quite similar to that one that I've used previously, but I can't find it anymore in my studio. Maybe this is configuration thing, but thanks God it's still there, because I found it also very useful, these refactor options. It makes it easier to find this inconvenience.
Yeah, I would say cleaning code without a refactoring tool, it's a dangerous exercise because you're doing substantial changes to the API often, and if you don't do that consistently, you will eventually lead to much problems. So if you don't have access to these refactoring tools, you're in a place where you can't do much cleanup, I would say.
Agree.
So, okay. Anything else we should mention today? No, hopefully learn something new, and hopefully I can contribute to some new knowledge tomorrow as well. So, bye now, and let's talk again on Scrum tomorrow. Bye-bye.
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 Thanks, Baron.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.